What happens when a self-righteous ice cream clerk refuses to serve a child because of his father's MAGA hat? Total career meltdown, that's what. Zoe Miller thought she was making a brave stand at Scoops and Smiles, completely unaware the man in the red cap was her new boss. The security footage caught it all, her smug smile dissolving into horror as reality came crashing down around her. 1 minute she was denying a child his birthday ice cream. The next, she was clearing out her locker. Turns out principles have consequences, especially when you mistake the owner for just another customer. She'd worked at that ice cream shop for 3 years, climbing from scooper to shift manager. 3 years of building a reputation, gone in 5 minutes of spectacular misjudgment. So let's see exactly how Zoe's perfect life melted away faster than ice cream on a summer sidewalk. Sunday afternoons at Scoops and Smiles were always chaotic. The line often stretched out the door, filled with families seeking weekend treats. Zoe prided herself on maintaining order amid the sugar-fueled frenzy, her efficiency legendary among the staff. Today was particularly busy, the summer heat driving half the town to seek relief in frozen form. Zoe moved with practiced precision behind the counter, scooping perfect spheres of Rocky Road and mint chocolate chip without missing a beat. "Keep it moving, Tyler," she called to the newest employee, a college freshman who still struggled with portion control. "There's 20 people waiting." The boy nodded nervously, his scoops becoming slightly faster if not more precise. At 24, Zoe was the youngest shift manager in the shop's history. Her promotion 6 months ago had given her a sense of authority that sometimes bordered on self-importance, though she'd never admit that to herself. "Next customer, please," she called, adjusting her Scoops and Smiles cap. The shop's uniform was simple. Blue apron, white shirt, branded cap. Zoe had added her own personal touch, a small rainbow pin on her apron collar. A freckle-faced boy of about 9 approached the counter, practically bouncing with excitement. Behind him stood his father, a tall man in jeans and a polo shirt, looking at his phone, and perched on his head, a bright red MAGA hat. Zoe's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Her gaze lingered on the hat, taking in its bold white lettering. The father didn't notice her stare, still preoccupied with his screen, but Zoe was suddenly hyper-aware of his presence. "Hi there. What can I get for you today?" she asked the boy, deliberately focusing solely on the child. The boy grinned widely, revealing a missing front tooth. "It's my birthday. Dad said I can have any flavor I want." "Happy birthday," Zoe replied warmly. "That's super exciting. Have you decided on your special flavor?" The boy nodded enthusiastically. "I want 3 scoops, chocolate, cookie dough, and that blue one with the cookie pieces." "Blue Monster," Zoe clarified with a smile. "That's one of my favorites too." She reached for a waffle cone, then hesitated, her eyes drifting back to the man in the red hat. He was still distracted by his phone, oblivious to her scrutiny. Something twisted in Zoe's stomach. That hat. She'd seen plenty of them over the years, but they never failed to make her skin crawl. To her, it represented everything wrong with the country. Division, hatred, bigotry. The boy was still chattering excitedly about his birthday party later that day. 20 friends coming over, a bounce house in the backyard, and now ice cream. His enthusiasm was infectious, but Zoe couldn't stop glancing at his father. "Dad, can I get sprinkles too? And whipped cream?" The boy tugged at his father's sleeve. The man finally looked up from his phone, smiling down at his son. "It's your birthday, buddy. Get whatever toppings you want." His voice was warm, ordinary, at odds with the statement Zoe felt his hat was making. She stood frozen, ice cream scoop in hand, as a battle raged within her. It was just a child's birthday ice cream, but that hat. Behind her, Tyler was handling another customer. The line was growing. Zoe knew she should just serve the kid and move on, but something inside her had snagged on that red cap, like a thorn catching on fabric. "Is something wrong?" the father asked, noticing her hesitation. His tone was perfectly pleasant, genuinely confused. Zoe gripped the metal scoop tighter, her knuckles whitening against the steel. She made her decision in that moment. "I'm sorry, but I don't feel comfortable serving you," she said, her voice quiet but firm. The boy's smile faltered, confusion washing over his freckled face. "What? Why?" he asked, his birthday excitement beginning to crack. The father blinked, caught off guard. "Excuse me?" He fully looked at Zoe now, taking in her stiff posture, her resolute expression. "There are plenty of other ice cream shops around town," Zoe continued, setting down the scoop. "I don't understand," the man said, his confusion giving way to disbelief. "You're refusing to serve my son ice cream on his birthday? Because of my hat?" The directness of his question made Zoe's cheeks flush, but she didn't back down. "That hat represents views I cannot support," she replied, crossing her arms. Scoops and Smiles strives to be an inclusive environment. She was making this up as she went, but her voice didn't waver. "I have the right to refuse service." The boy looked up at his father, his eyes beginning to shine with unshed tears. "Dad, why won't she give me ice cream?" The innocence of the question made several customers in line shift uncomfortably. This was getting awkward fast. The father placed a protective hand on his son's shoulder. "It's not about you, buddy," he said softly, then looked back at Zoe. "This is ridiculous. You're punishing a child for his father's political views?" Zoe felt a flash of doubt but pushed it aside. "I'm not punishing anyone. I'm exercising my right to." The father cut her off with a raised hand, his voice still level but firmer now. "My son is 9 years old. Today is his birthday. All he wants is ice cream. Whatever issue you have with my politics has nothing to do with him." The logic was uncomfortably sound, poking holes in Zoe's righteous stand. By now, other employees had noticed the commotion. Tyler hovered nearby, unsure whether to intervene. A few customers had pulled out phones, sensing the potential for a viral moment in the making. Zoe stood her ground. "Sir, I've made my decision. There's a Baskin-Robbins 3 blocks down." She gestured toward the door, ignoring the growing knot in her stomach. The boy was fully crying now, quiet tears of confusion and disappointment. The father looked at his son, then back at Zoe. Something shifted in his expression. Not anger, surprisingly, but a kind of sad resignation. "Come on, buddy," he said gently. "Let's go somewhere else for your birthday treat." As they turned to leave, the boy still wiping tears, the father paused. "What's your name?" he asked Zoe. The question caught her off guard, but she answered automatically. "Zoe. Zoe Miller." He nodded, as if filing the information away. "Who's the manager here, Zoe?" His tone remained conversational, which somehow made it worse than if he'd been shouting. Zoe lifted her chin. "I'm the shift manager on duty." A small spark of pride, despite the tension. "And above you?" he pressed. Zoe hesitated. "Clara Winters is the general manager. She's not in today." The man nodded again, taking this in. "Thank you for the information. Enjoy the rest of your day." With that, he led his disappointed son out the door. No explosion, no scene. Just a quiet exit that somehow left Zoe feeling more unsettled than vindicated. The line of customers moved forward again, an awkward energy lingering in the shop. "What was that about?" Tyler whispered as they worked side by side. Zoe shrugged, trying to shake off her discomfort. Just taking a stand for what's right. But the boy's tears kept flashing in her mind. By closing time, Zoe had almost convinced herself she'd done the right thing. Yes, the child had been caught in the crossfire, but sometimes moral stands had collateral damage. Besides, the father had handled it with surprising grace. When she arrived for her Monday afternoon shift, something felt off. Clara's office door was closed, which was unusual. Through the glass partition, Zoe could see not just Clara, but a man in a suit she didn't recognize. "Zoe," Clara called, spotting her through the window. "Could you come in here, please?" Her voice was professionally pleasant, but Zoe caught the tension underneath. Something was definitely wrong. When she entered the office, Clara gestured to a chair. "Have a seat." The man in the suit watched Zoe with an unreadable expression. "This is Mr. Donovan," Clara said. "He represents the new ownership of Scoops and Smiles." "New ownership?" Zoe's confusion must have shown on her face. Clara continued. "Sweet Treats Inc. purchased our shop last week. The transition was supposed to be announced today." Mr. Donovan remained silent, observing Zoe carefully. "I don't understand," Zoe said, looking between them. "What does this have to do with me?" Clara's expression tightened. "There was an incident yesterday, with a customer wearing a red hat and his son." Zoe's stomach dropped. "Yes, but," Clara cut her off with a raised hand. "The customer you refused to serve was Michael Reynolds." The name hung in the air, clearly meant to mean something to Zoe. It didn't. "Michael Reynolds," Mr. Donovan finally spoke, "is the CEO of Sweet Treats Inc. He was visiting the shop with his son to get a feel for the business he just purchased." Each word fell like a stone into Zoe's consciousness. The new owner, she whispered, the full implications crashing down around her. The man in the MAGA hat wasn't just any customer. He was her new boss, and she had refused to serve his child ice cream on his birthday. I didn't know, Zoe managed, her voice small. Mr. Donovan nodded. Clearly. But that's not really the issue here, is it, Miss Thabeth Miller? The issue is that you refused service to a child because you disagreed with his father's politics. I thought I was standing up for inclusivity, Zoe said weakly, knowing how hollow it sounded. By excluding a 9-year-old on his birthday? Mr. Donovan's tone wasn't angry, just matter of fact, which somehow made it worse. Clara looked deeply uncomfortable. Zoe, Scoops and Smiles, has never had a policy of refusing service based on political beliefs. That was your personal decision. The disappointment in her manager's voice stung worse than anger would have. I thought I was doing the right thing, Zoe insisted, though her conviction was crumbling by the second. Mr. Donovan leaned forward, his expression serious but not unkind. The right thing would have been serving the child ice cream. Mr. Reynolds was surprisingly understanding about the situation, Clara added. He recognizes that you didn't know who he was. A small mercy, but Zoe wasn't feeling particularly relieved. The other shoe was about to drop. She could feel it. However, Mr. Donovan continued, confirming her fears. He does have concerns about an employee who would use their position to discriminate against customers based on perceived political affiliations. There it was. The axe was falling. Am I being fired? Zoe asked directly, her voice steadier than she felt. Clara and Mr. Donovan exchanged glances. Not exactly, Clara replied, but your position as shift manager is being terminated, effective immediately. The relief of not being completely fired mingled with the sting of demotion. 3 years of work, her recent promotion, all undone in a moment of misguided principle. I'll be back on regular scooping duty? She asked. Mr. Donovan shook his head. You'll be transferred to our production facility. No customer interaction. Same hourly rate, but no management responsibilities or tips. A sideways move that felt distinctly like a step down. Zoe nodded numbly. What choice did she have? Jobs weren't easy to come by in this town, and she needed the income for her community college classes. When do I start? She asked, her voice flat with resignation. Tomorrow, Clara said, sliding a packet across the desk. Here's the information on your new position and location. Her expression softened slightly. This isn't what any of us wanted, Zoe. You've been a good employee. Until I wasn't, Zoe thought but didn't say. She took the packet, barely registering the details. Factory work instead of ice cream shop management. All because of a hat and a child's birthday and her own misplaced righteousness. As she left Clara's office, Zoe caught sight of her reflection in the glass partition. She looked the same as yesterday, but everything had changed. The rainbow pin on her collar, once a proud symbol of inclusivity, now seemed ironic. Tyler was watching her from behind the counter, his expression a mix of curiosity and concern. Word would spread fast. By tomorrow, everyone would know how Zoe Miller's promising career at Scoops and Smiles had melted away over a red hat. Clearing out her locker was the hardest part. 3 years of small accumulations, spare hair ties, her favorite ice cream scoop, photos of the staff at last year's Christmas party, tangible reminders of a job she had genuinely loved. Clara appeared as Zoe was zipping up her backpack. You know, she said quietly, it wasn't the hat that got you transferred. It was refusing to serve a child. The distinction seemed important to Clara, though it changed nothing for Zoe. I thought I was taking a principled stand, Zoe replied, shouldering her bag. Clara sighed. Principles are important, Zoe, but so is kindness. So is seeing people as individuals, not just symbols of what you oppose. The words hit harder than Zoe expected. Wasn't that exactly what she accused those people of doing? Reducing others to stereotypes? Yet she'd done the same thing, seeing only a hat and not a father with his son on a special day. For what it's worth, Clara added, Mr. Reynolds asked specifically that you not be fired completely. He said everyone deserves a second chance. This information landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples through Zoe's certainty. The man she had judged so harshly based on his hat had shown more compassion than she had. The irony wasn't lost on Zoe as she walked out of the shop, the familiar bell above the door signaling her departure. The production facility was exactly as uninspiring as Zoe had imagined. Hairnets, assembly lines, the constant hum of machinery mixing ice cream in massive steel vats, no children's smiling faces, no creative Sunday designs, no tips. Her new supervisor, Ron, was efficiently businesslike as he showed her around. "You'll be on quality control," he explained, pointing to a station where employees checked pints for proper filling and lid sealing. "It's important work." Important, maybe, but joyless compared to the front-of-house position she'd lost. Zoe nodded mechanically as Ron explained procedures and protocols, her mind still replaying the moment she'd refused to serve that freckle-faced birthday boy. By her third day, the routine had already become mind-numbingly familiar. Check, stamp, move, repeat. The factory employees were friendly enough, but there was none of the camaraderie she'd shared with her ice cream shop colleagues. During her lunch break, Zoe scrolled through social media, finding unwelcome evidence that her story had indeed gone viral. "Ice cream clerk refuses kids service over dad's hat. Turns out dad's the boss," read one particularly painful headline. The comments were brutal, split along predictable political lines. Half called her a hero, the other half a villain. Neither side seemed concerned about the actual child caught in the middle. It was all abstract principles and point scoring. On Friday, a week into her new position, Zoe was called to the administrative offices. Her heart raced as she followed the receptionist down a carpeted hallway. Was this the final firing? Had they decided the demotion wasn't punishment enough? The office she was led to wasn't what she expected. Spacious and well-appointed, with large windows overlooking the production floor. And sitting behind the desk was a familiar face, Michael Reynolds, the man in the MAGA hat himself. "Miss Miller," he said, rising from his chair. "Thank you for coming. Please, have a seat." His tone was professional, neither warm nor cold. Zoe sat stiffly, her hands clasped in her lap to hide their trembling. "I thought we should talk," Reynolds continued, sitting back down. "Person to person, without the ice cream counter between us." There was no hat today, just a man in business casual attire, looking every bit the CEO. "Mr. Reynolds, I want to apologize," Zoe began, the words tumbling out. "What I did was unprofessional and wrong. I made assumptions based on your hat, and I hurt your son in the process. I'm truly sorry." Reynolds studied her for a moment, then nodded. "I appreciate that, and I accept your apology." He leaned back in his chair. "Do you know why I wear that hat sometimes, Miss Miller?" The question caught her off guard. I assumed it was because you support certain political views," she answered carefully. Reynolds smiled slightly. "It was my father's. He died last year. He was a complicated man with views I often disagreed with, but he was my dad." The simple explanation knocked the wind from Zoe's self-righteousness. A son honoring his father, just as he'd been trying to honor his own son's birthday. The parallels weren't lost on her. "I didn't know," she said quietly. "How could you?" Reynolds replied. "That's my point. You saw a symbol and made judgments without knowing anything about me as a person." He leaned forward. "Do you know why I didn't fire you completely, Miss Miller?" Zoe shook her head, genuinely curious now. Reynolds tapped his fingers thoughtfully on his desk. "Because my 9-year-old son asked me not to." The revelation sent a shock through Zoe's system, the very child whose day she'd ruined. "He said everyone makes mistakes," Reynolds continued. His exact words were, "Maybe she was just having a bad day, Dad." He smiled at the memory. Kids can be remarkably forgiving, sometimes more than adults. Tears pricked at Zoe's eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. "That's very kind of him," she managed. Reynolds nodded. "It is, and it made me think about what kind of example I want to set, about forgiveness, about seeing beyond labels." He pulled a folder from his desk drawer. "Which brings me to the reason I called you here today. I'm offering you a position in our marketing department. Your manager at Scoops and Smiles spoke highly of your creativity." Zoe stared at him, unable to process what she was hearing. "You're promoting me? After what I did?" Reynolds shook his head. "Not promoting, offering a fresh start, in a role where your communication skills might be valuable." "Why would you do this?" Zoe asked, genuinely confused. Reynolds considered her question carefully before answering. "Because I believe people can grow. Because cancel culture on both sides has gone too far. Because my son saw humanity where others might not." He slid the folder across the desk. The position involves creating inclusive marketing campaigns for our products, reaching across demographics, finding common ground. The irony wasn't subtle, but it wasn't cruel either. It was an opportunity. Think about it, Reynolds said, standing to signal the end of their meeting. You don't have to decide right now. He extended his hand across the desk. Whatever you choose, I hope you learned something from all this. I know I did. Zoe stood and took his hand, her grip firm despite her internal trembling. Thank you for the second chance, she said. I don't deserve it, but I'm grateful. Reynolds smiled, a genuine expression that reached his eyes. We all deserve second chances, Miss Miller. The trick is recognizing when we're given one. He released her hand. My son's having another birthday party next year. Maybe by then we'll all be a little wiser about what really matters. Walking back to her quality control station, folder clutched to her chest, Zoe felt something shift inside her. The world wasn't as simple as hats and pins, heroes and villains. It was complex, contradictory, and occasionally surprising in its capacity for forgiveness. Even from a man in a red cap, she once thought she understood. What do you think? How would you have handled this situation if it were you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever faced anything similar in your own life? Don't forget to like and share if this story resonated with you.